Antonio Conte, he also looked a bit knackered on Thursday. Thursday night. I'm losing my days now. If you watch it back, especially my first question, it may just be that he was answering questions for me, from me. But he was like, he's talking and stuff like that. He looks shattered. He looks like he's really experienced Tottenham Hotspur. The full experience that we have had for years. He's kind of getting a bit of a concentrated dose of the Tottenham Hotspur experience. Like I say, bit spiky in the pre-match one. And he had this, he was kind of teed up for a little bit. The question was, should the hierarchy of clubs be put out there to talk about big decisions, or club strategy? Would it be helpful to you if, the chairman was more communicative? And of course, he absolutely leapt on that. It was like a release valve. He's like, yes, kind of thing. Because in Italy, it is, as he rightly says, it's a big thing there. That's what they do. Paratici, who we've obviously spoken a fair bit about already, would speak every single week pretty much to Sky Sport Italia ahead of games. And a lot of the kind of sporting directors and everything would do that when they're in the Italian league. It's not something that I know it's obviously definitely not a thing in England. We know that. I don't know whether it's such a big thing in other countries outside Italy. I don't know. I must admit, I don't see enough of their pre-match media stuff to know. But everything I see still seems to be press conferences with the coaches. I'm sure there's probably slightly more from sporting directors and type like that. But yeah, I don't make Conte wrong in that regard. I think, if there was ever a club that needs to be dragged out of the shadows, it's Tottenham, and have their kind of powers that be connect a little bit more with the fans than they do. Just connect slightly would be a start. You've heard me speak about this before, but many a manager has been kind of prodded out in front of the cameras and like, go on, you talk about it. And that's all well and good as long as Conte has the time and he shows the patience and he makes the progress along with Tottenham. And he's just never entirely convinced that he's going to be. Look, I just want to make it clear, that sounds like I'm putting it on Conte. It's not. As I said, there's an element of Conte that there's little things he does that I do wish he'd do in a different way. But this is also on Daniel Levy. Daniel Levy very much appointed a manager that he knew was going to be like this. He knew was going to be vocal, and he knew he was potentially a short-term manager. So there's no kind of getting away from that. Like I say, he knew he was a manager that required a certain level of funding. And this is why he needs to help him. Daniel Levy has to be there for Antonio Conte in the next 11 days. He needs to pull one or two things out of the hat, preferably two, I think, as well. Because, for me, this feels like a critical juncture. It really does. It feels like one of those moments. I think last January was one, and Spurs got it right. So I think they've got to be praised for they did it right. But they've got it wrong in the past. Not least, probably the most notable in my recent memory is those two transfer windows they did nothing in. That was unforgivable. For some reason, it's warped into 3 transfer windows when some people talk about it. I'm pretty certain it was 2. It was a 2018-19 season, wasn't it? The January window before that, they got Lucas Moura. And then the transfer window after that was the Tongi, Cess, Lo Celso, Jack Clark windows. I think it was just the 2, but for some reason it's become 3. I don't know why. It was 2's bad enough. 1's bad enough, especially if it's a summer one. But 2 is bad enough. That was disastrous, honestly. That was, look, the Champions League final absolutely papered over the cracks of those 2 transfer windows. Poch had a stagnating squad. You could tell it was stagnating. It needed those 2 windows to revitalise it, refresh it, do whatever you needed to do to it. And I think the club let him down. I think Daniel Levy, whoever you want to call it, they let him down. The money was not spent. Poch was not happy. It was clear at the time. And I think that Champions League final almost served as not only papering over the cracks, but actually kind of the defeat itself in Madrid convinced a lot of that squad that's as good as it was ever going to get, especially when you're coming off of 2 windows where nothing's been spent whatsoever. Oh, honestly, it was so disastrous, that window. And then they took their time as well. They got Tongi, but then they took their time in that next summer window as well, and Poch was getting so wound up by it. And this feels like another one of those stick or twist moments for me. Don't be that Tottenham Hotspur. Don't be that Daniel Levy in the board. Be the one of at least last January and bring in 2 players that will, the season will hinge upon. Because if they don't, I think top 4's out of the question.